David, what is this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, pointing at the title slide of the presentation. My stomach clenched tighter than a fist. Why isn't my name on here? He chuckled, a dismissive sound that sent a chill down my spine. Sarah, darling, it's just a formality. We can add you later. This is my moment. My moment. My vision blurred for a second, and in that instant, watching the man I had trusted implicitly brush me off like a fly, I knew my life, as I knew it, was about to change forever. My name is Sarah Miller, and I was 27 years old when I learned that sometimes, the people who seem to lift you up the most are actually just looking for a higher pedestal to stand on themselves. I'd always been a dreamer, but a practical one. My dreams weren't about fame or fortune, but about building something meaningful, something that could genuinely make a difference. That's what drew me to technology, and specifically, to innovation. I thrived on solving complex problems and bringing abstract ideas to life. My journey at Nexus Innovations had started 3 years prior. It was a dynamic, mid-sized tech company with a reputation for fostering talent, or so I thought. Fresh out of my master's program in software engineering, I was eager to prove myself. From the moment I walked through the doors, David Maxwell, my department head, seemed to take me under his wing. David was everything you'd want in a mentor, charismatic, insightful, seemingly boundless in his energy. He was in his late 40s, with a distinguished salt and pepper beard and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which was often. He had this incredible way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the room, like your ideas were gold, and your potential was limitless. He'd lean in, listen intently, nod thoughtfully, and then offer advice that felt both profound and genuinely supportive. Sarah, he'd say, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder during one of our many late-night strategy sessions, your ideas are gold. Don't ever hold back. This isn't just a company, it's a family. And in this family, your contributions are safe with me. We're a team, a true partnership. He repeated that mantra often, we're a team, a family. Your contributions are safe with me. It wasn't just words, he embodied it. He'd fight for extra resources for my smaller projects, give me credit in team meetings, and even advocate for my promotions. He made me feel seen, valued, and protected. He genuinely felt like a father figure, someone I could trust implicitly, someone who truly had my best interests at heart. I confided in him not just about work challenges, but sometimes about personal aspirations, even anxieties. I felt a deep, almost familial, loyalty to him and to Nexus. Then came the project. It started as a small, audacious idea born from months of late-night coding and research. I was trying to solve a pervasive problem in data management, how to create a more intuitive, secure, and infinitely scalable system for large organizations. I spent countless hours sketching out algorithms, running simulations, and building prototypes. It was complex, demanding, and utterly consuming. But I loved every minute of it. This wasn't just a task, it was my passion project, my baby. I remember the day I first brought it to David. I was nervous, presenting my preliminary findings and a rough demo of what I called Nexus Core. He sat there, initially quiet, his expression unreadable. I braced myself for criticism, for a polite dismissal. Instead, his eyes lit up. Sarah, he said, his voice hushed with genuine awe, this is revolutionary. This isn't just an improvement, it's a game changer. This could put Nexus on the map like nothing before. From that moment on, Nexus Core became our shared obsession. At least, that's what I thought. David allocated a small team to assist me, but the core development, the intellectual heavy lifting, remained solely my responsibility. He would schedule regular check-ins, sometimes daily, poring over my code, dissecting my logic, offering feedback. He'd encourage me to be completely transparent, to share every struggle, every breakthrough, every tiny detail. No secrets, Sarah, He'd insist with a warm smile. We're building something monumental here. Every piece of information helps me protect the integrity of your work, to make sure it gets the recognition it deserves. I shared everything. I sent him every file, every iteration, every draft of the technical documentation. I even copied him on emails to external vendors for components, believing he was ensuring everything ran smoothly. He was my sounding board, my confidant. When I hit a snag, he'd listen patiently, offer a fresh perspective, and always make me feel like I was on the right track. He seemed genuinely invested, not just in the project, but in my growth. I'll handle the presentation, Sarah, he'd told me, his tone radiating excitement. You've done the heavy lifting on the development. Let me handle the showmanship. It's what I do best, right? And don't worry, you'll be front and center for the Q&A. This is our moment. I nodded, a surge of pride swelling in my chest. Our moment. I trusted him. I trusted him completely. As Nexus Core moved into its final stages, something in David began to shift. It was subtle at first, like a barely perceptible change in the office hum. He was still the charming, encouraging mentor, but a new layer started to emerge beneath the surface. He became more possessive, almost, about the project. He'd insist on reviewing every single file before I shared it with the wider team, claiming it was for quality control or strategic oversight. Just making sure all our ducks are in a row, Sarah, he'd say with a knowing wink, before we show the world what we've built. His meetings with me grew more frequent, but less about collaboration and more about extraction. He'd ask for detailed breakdowns of every algorithm, every design choice, every piece of data. I explained everything patiently, believing I was giving him the ammunition he needed to champion our work. He'd scribble notes furiously, sometimes even recording our conversations, citing efficiency and historical record. I thought nothing of it, it felt like a natural extension of our trusting relationship. He was just being thorough, preparing to launch our masterpiece. Then came the bigger changes. David started taking credit for minor wins in team meetings, casually mentioning his insights that led to breakthroughs I had personally wrestled with for days. My contributions were still acknowledged, but always prefaced with under David's brilliant guidance or following David's initial vision. It was a slow drip, a subtle erosion of my direct authorship. I dismissed it as him being a manager, needing to assert his leadership, maybe even trying to protect me from the full weight of the corporate spotlight. He was my shield, right? My advocate. The true alarm bells, however, didn't ring until Nexus announced the Tech Innovate Summit. It was the conference. Every major player, every investor, every aspiring innovator would be there. David called me into his office, a wide smile on his face. Sarah, we did it. Nexus Core is going to be unveiled at the summit. And I'll be leading the presentation, of course. He beamed, clearly thrilled. You've done the heavy lifting on the development. Let me handle the showmanship. It's what I do best, right? And don't worry, you'll be front and center for the Q&A. This is our moment. Our moment. The words felt hollow now. Why wasn't I presenting? I was the architect, the one who breathed life into every line of code. He was good at presenting, incredibly charismatic, but this was my project. A knot of unease tightened in my chest, but I pushed it down. He was the senior leader, the father figure. Maybe it was just how things worked. Maybe he knew best. A few days before the summit, David's office door was ajar. I was passing by, on my way to grab a coffee, when I saw it, his laptop screen, illuminated with a presentation title slide. My breath hitched. It was the Nexus Core presentation, the one he'd be giving. Curiosity, mixed with that persistent unease, pulled me in. I edged closer, straining to see. And then I saw it. The title. The bold, confident font. And beneath it, a single name, presented by David Maxwell. No, in collaboration with. No, with contributions from. No, developed by Sarah Miller. Just him. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The world seemed to tilt. Every late night, every breakthrough, every frustration, every ounce of my dedication, all of it was erased. He had taken my magnum opus, my passion project, and branded it as solely his own. The man who had preached trust, who had promised protection, had systematically stripped me of my identity in this work. He wasn't my shield, he was my thief. My father figure had betrayed me with cold, calculated precision. A wave of nausea washed over me, quickly followed by a cold, searing anger. How could he? How dare he? I wanted to scream, to smash his laptop, to demand answers. But a small, defiant voice deep inside me whispered, "Not like this. Not here." I remembered everything he'd told me, no secrets, Sarah. And I remembered every file, every email, every version control timestamp that proved my authorship. He'd asked for transparency, I'd given it to him. But in doing so, I had also created an undeniable trail. A flicker of resolve ignited within me. I wouldn't just sit back. The day of the summit arrived, a beautiful, crisp autumn morning in New York City that felt utterly incongruous with the storm brewing inside me. The convention center hummed with anticipation. David moved through the crowd, radiating confidence, shaking hands, soaking in the pre-presentation buzz. He saw me, gave me a brief, condescending smile, and then moved on. My stomach was a tangle of nerves, but beneath it, a steely determination had settled. When David stepped onto the stage, the spotlight found him, illuminating his confident posture and his practiced, charming smile. He launched into his presentation, his voice booming with authority, effortlessly explaining my complex ideas as if they were his own spontaneous insights. Each slide, each graph, each revolutionary concept was a direct echo of my work. My heart pounded, a furious drumbeat against my ribs. I watched him, a stranger embodying my dreams, and a strange calm settled over me. He reached the end of his presentation, a flourish of grand statements about the future. The audience erupted in applause. Then, the moderator stepped forward, and now, for the Q&A session. We have a few minutes for questions from the audience. My hand shot up. David's eyes flickered to me, a momentary surprise, quickly masked by a polite smile. He probably expected a softball question, an eager junior employee praising his brilliance. He nodded in my direction. "Yes, Sarah," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I walked to the nearest microphone, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. The room was huge, filled with hundreds of industry leaders, investors, and fellow innovators. My voice, when it came, was clear, though it trembled slightly. "Good morning, David. My name is Sarah Miller, and I'm a senior software engineer at Nexus Innovations. I have a question regarding the core architecture of the Nexus core system." I paused, letting my title sink in. Then I continued, focusing not on David, but on the screen behind him, which displayed one of my complex architectural diagrams. "You spoke about the adaptive scalability module as a key innovation. Could you elaborate on the specific algorithmic challenges you personally encountered and overcame in integrating the real-time data streaming protocols into the predictive analytics engine?" The room fell silent. David's confident smile faltered. His eyes darted around, searching. The question was too specific, too technical, too deeply intertwined with the intricacies that only someone who had built it, piece by piece, would truly understand. It wasn't a question he could charm his way out of. He was trapped. David Maxwell, usually so composed, looked like a deer caught in headlights. His smile had vanished, replaced by a tight, forced grimace. He stammered, cleared his throat, and glanced desperately at the moderator. "Sarah, that's a very detailed question," he fumbled, trying to buy time. Perhaps we can discuss the specifics of the data streaming protocols offline. For now, let's keep questions to the broader implications of Nexus Core. A ripple went through the audience. They sensed the shift, the sudden discomfort. Some looked intrigued, others confused. I stood my ground, my gaze unwavering. The moderator, sensing the tension, stepped in. Indeed, Mr. Maxwell, perhaps a more general overview. But Ms. Miller's question certainly highlights the depth of the project. He subtly nodded in my direction, a flicker of professional curiosity in his eyes. David quickly recovered, his charm reasserting itself. He launched into a vague, high-level answer, skillfully sidestepping my question. He wrapped up the Q&A prematurely, almost rushing off the stage. The applause that followed was noticeably less enthusiastic. As the crowd began to disperse, I saw David heading straight for the company executives who had been sitting in the front row, his expression grim. I didn't try to confront him backstage. I knew it would be a futile shouting match, and my battle wasn't just with David anymore, it was with the narrative he was already constructing. I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and dread. I had exposed him, yes, but at what cost? The cost became clear the very next morning. As soon as I walked into the Nexus Innovations office, the air felt thick with unspoken tension. Colleagues avoided my gaze, hushed whispers followed me down the hallway. My phone buzzed, an urgent meeting request from Human Resources and, unexpectedly, the CEO's office. I walked into a sterile conference room. David was already there, looking impeccably calm, almost smug. Opposite him sat Mr. Henderson, the CEO, a man I respected greatly, and Ms. Davies from HR, her face unreadable. There was an empty chair for me. Mr. Henderson began, his voice surprisingly gentle, yet firm. Sarah, we need to discuss yesterday's events at the summit. David has given us his account, and frankly, we're very concerned. David leaned forward, his voice dripping with false empathy. Sarah, I know you're passionate, truly. And I appreciate your contributions to the project. But your behavior yesterday, it was unprofessional. It was disruptive. It publicly undermined me, and by extension, the company. My blood ran cold. Undermined you, David? My behavior. You presented my work as your own. Every line of code, every design decision, every single innovation in Nexus Core came from me. My voice rose, betraying the calm I'd tried to maintain. David sighed, a performance of weariness. Sarah, we've had many discussions about this project. I've mentored you, guided you, helped shape your raw ideas into something viable. This was a collaborative effort, a team effort, my team. But you seem to have inflated your role, perhaps due to the pressure of the moment. He turned to the CEO. With all due respect, Mr. Henderson, Sarah is a talented junior engineer, but she's emotionally invested, and prone to overstating her individual contributions. Mr. Henderson's expression hardened slightly. Sarah, David has shown us extensive documentation. Project plans, emails, meeting notes, all detailing his direct involvement from day one, and his role in guiding the project. He's also provided evidence of your repeated emotional outbursts in private discussions regarding credit. Emotional outbursts. My jaw dropped. I had never had an emotional outburst with David. Every conversation had been professional, respectful, driven by my desire to protect my work. He had clearly manipulated evidence, twisted context, perhaps even manufactured emails. He had used my trust, my openness, to build a case against me. He had weaponized the very transparency he had so ardently preached. That's a lie. I countered, my voice shaking with indignation. He asked for every file, every detail. He said it was to protect my work. I have the original timestamps, the version control logs, my personal development notes. I can prove it. Ms. Davies from HR, who had remained silent until now, spoke in a cool, detached tone. Sarah, while we appreciate your passion, we cannot allow this kind of internal discord to fester, especially not after such a public incident. Your accusations, despite your claims, lack the executive-level backing or concrete, undeniable proof that would override a senior leader's established record. We need a cohesive, trusting environment. Her words were a stark realization. They had already made their decision. David, the charismatic, long-standing, father figure, executive, had won. His narrative, polished and presented with manipulative skill, had overshadowed my raw, indignant truth. They weren't looking for justice, they were looking for control, for stability, and for a story that didn't rock the corporate boat. Mr. Henderson leaned forward, his voice now devoid of any pretense of gentleness. Sarah, Nexus Innovations is a family, and we value loyalty. Your actions yesterday were disruptive and undermined our senior leadership. We are prepared to offer you a path to stay, under strict conditions. You must retract your public statements about authorship, accept a demotion to a non-project lead role, and agree to sensitivity training. Alternatively, he paused, his gaze firm, you can choose to resign. We will, of course, honor your severance package as per your contract. The ultimatum hung in the air, cold and definitive. Retract my truth, stifle my spirit, and work under the man who stole my life's work, or walk away with nothing but my self-respect. The decision was surprisingly easy. The rage, the disappointment, the sense of utter betrayal solidified into a hard, unyielding resolve. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I won't retract anything, I stated, my voice clear and steady now, devoid of the earlier tremor. And I won't accept a demotion for defending my own work. My integrity is not up for negotiation. I looked directly at David, whose smug expression faltered for a second. I choose to resign. I turned, walked out of the conference room, and didn't look back. The moment I stepped out of the building and into the bustling city street, a profound sense of liberation washed over me, mingling with the sting of injustice. They had forced me out, but they hadn't broken me. Not yet. Stepping out of the Nexus Innovations building felt like shedding a heavy, suffocating cloak. The city air, once a symbol of opportunity, now tasted like freedom. Yet, beneath the initial surge of defiance, a quiet bitterness lingered. I had spent 3 years pouring my soul into that company, into my project, only to be dismissed and slandered by the man I'd trusted most. They thought they had silenced me, pushed me aside. They were about to learn they had merely cleared my path. I spent the next few days in a whirlwind. Updating my resume, polishing my portfolio, and discreetly reaching out to old contacts. There was a particular company I had always admired, Meridian Tech. They were known for fostering innovation and, more importantly, for their ethical leadership. I'd had a few casual conversations with their recruiters in the past, and I decided now was the time to pursue it seriously. My interview process at Meridian was refreshingly different. They weren't just interested in my technical skills, they wanted to hear about my vision, my approach to problem solving, and my leadership style. I presented Nexus Core not as David's stolen triumph, but as my own brainchild, meticulously detailing my development process and the unique challenges I overcame. I didn't overtly badmouth Nexus, but I spoke with a quiet passion that conveyed ownership and genuine pride. Within a week, Meridian Tech offered me a senior lead engineer position. It was a step up, with more autonomy and a chance to build my own team. I accepted immediately. The feeling of starting fresh, with a company that seemed to truly value individual contribution, was invigorating. My first few weeks at Meridian were a blur of onboarding and getting to know my new colleagues. The culture was indeed starkly different. Transparency was encouraged, and leadership actively sought input from all levels. It was a breath of fresh air. But even as I immersed myself in my new role, the injustice at Nexus still simmered. It wasn't about revenge in the destructive sense, it was about justice. It was about proving that integrity and genuine innovation would ultimately prevail. My initial focus was building my new team. I knew exactly who I needed. I thought about the sharp minds, the dedicated individuals from my old department at Nexus who had supported Nexus Core from its nascent stages. People who had seen my countless hours, my dedication, and David's gradual encroachment. I knew they respected me and perhaps, like me, felt stifled by the rigid, self-serving corporate culture David had fostered. My first call was to Mark. Mark and I had joined Nexus around the same time, and he was one of the most brilliant back-end developers I knew. He'd often share a knowing glance with me during David's more egregious self-congratulatory moments. "Hey Mark," I started, keeping my tone casual. "Long time no talk. How's things at Nexus?" There was a slight pause. "Oh, hey Sarah. It's fine. Quieter since you left. And honestly, a bit directionless. The big project David's supposed to be leading. It's just sitting there, not really moving forward." "Is that so?" I feigned surprise. "Well, I just started a new role at Meridian Tech, and we're actually building out a new division. We're looking for top talent, people who are passionate about innovation and aren't afraid to take ownership of their work. People like you." I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "We're working on some cutting-edge stuff, and the culture here, it's about genuine collaboration, Mark. No smoke and mirrors." Mark was quiet for a moment. "Tell me more," he finally said, his voice laced with renewed interest. That conversation was just the beginning. I didn't try to poach entire departments, I just offered opportunities to those I knew were undervalued, those who shared my vision for true innovation, and those who saw through David's facade. One by one, then in small groups, talented engineers, designers, and even project managers started making the leap to Meridian. They weren't just joining a new company, they were joining my team, drawn by the promise of genuine contribution and ethical leadership. It wasn't long before a significant portion of my former Nexus department had followed me. Seeing familiar, respected faces fill my new office space was incredibly validating. We were a lean, focused unit, and the energy was electric. We were ready to build something even better. But the exodus wasn't limited to internal talent. My next strategic move involved the clients. Building a new team at Meridian Tech was invigorating, but my focus wasn't just internal. I knew that a significant part of Nexus Innovation's success, especially with major contracts, rested on the personal relationships I had cultivated over the years. I wasn't just an engineer, I was often the face of their projects for key clients, the one who patiently explained complex solutions and truly listened to their needs. My next step was to reconnect with those clients. I didn't engage in any direct solicitation while at Nexus, nor did I use any of their confidential information. Instead, I simply used my professional network. I reached out to contacts at companies I had worked with, starting with the ones who had expressed the most personal satisfaction with my direct involvement. "Hello, client name, it's Sarah Miller," I'd begin, my voice warm and professional. "I've recently moved to Meridian Tech, where I'm building a new division focused on innovative solutions. I truly valued our partnership at Nexus, and I wanted to let you know where I've landed." The conversations often quickly turned to their satisfaction with the work I had personally overseen, and their quiet disappointment with the lack of direct support from Nexus since my departure. Many expressed concerns about the Nexus Core project, which had been so hyped but seemed to have stalled. They knew I was the one who had brought that vision to life. Honestly, Sarah, one long-standing client, a no-nonsense executive from a major retail chain, confessed to me, "When you left, the whole vibe at Nexus changed. David's a great talker, but when it comes to delivering on the intricacies of a project like Nexus Core, he just doesn't have your depth. We were promised continued development, but it's been radio silence." I listened, validated but not gloating. "Well, at Meridian, we believe in delivering, not just promising," I'd respond, then gently steer the conversation to the innovative work my new team was doing, which often happened to align perfectly with their unresolved needs. I explained our capabilities, shared our commitment to client partnership, and invited them to see what we were building. One by one, they started to follow. It wasn't about price wars or aggressive poaching. It was about trust, about proven results, and about the quality of the relationships I had built. They weren't just hiring Meridian, they were hiring me and the team I was building. They were investing in the person who had consistently delivered for them, who understood their business, and who, unlike David, was genuine. As clients migrated, the ripple effect at Nexus Innovations became undeniable. Without a significant portion of its experienced talent, and with key revenue streams drying up, the company started to unravel. The Nexus Core project, David's supposed crowning achievement, languished. Without my blueprints, without the engineers who truly understood its complex architecture, it remained stuck in limbo, a brilliant concept that David couldn't actualize. He tried to recruit new talent, but the industry was a small world, and stories of his management style, now amplified by the public display at the summit, began to circulate. The calls started coming in. First, from frantic HR managers at Nexus, demanding I stop interfering with their client relationships. Then, the emails, thinly veiled threats about legal action. But the one that really got under my skin, the one that made me grip my phone so tight my knuckles turned white, was from David himself. "Sarah, what the hell do you think you're doing?" he spat, his voice devoid of its usual practiced charm, laced instead with pure rage. "You're destroying everything. You're actively sabotaging us." I took a deep breath, letting the fury wash over me, then pushed it back down, channeling it into a calm, cutting clarity. "Destroying everything, David? No, I'm just building something new. Something real. You're destroying yourselves. Clients are abandoning us because of you," he yelled, his voice cracking. "Do you have any conscience? Any sense of loyalty after all we did for you?" I barked out a short, humorless laugh. "Conscience? Loyalty? David, you're the absolute last person on this planet who should be talking about conscience. You stole my work, publicly humiliated me, and then lied to kick me out. You played the victim, and now that your house of cards is falling, you want to preach about ethics." My voice was low, steady, but each word was a hammer blow. "You told me we were family. You told me my ideas were safe with you. You told me to trust you implicitly. And then you tried to erase me." He stammered, speechless for a moment. This is revenge." "No, David," I countered, my voice gaining strength. "This isn't revenge. This is justice. I'm not doing this to you. I'm doing this for me, for my integrity, for my work. And if your company can't survive without stealing from its own talent, then maybe it doesn't deserve to." I hung up before he could respond, my hand trembling, but my spirit soaring. The calls eventually stopped. The legal threats amounted to nothing. David Maxwell, the charismatic father figure, found his pedestal crumbling beneath him. The initial trust the directors had placed in him quickly eroded as quarterly reports showed plummeting revenue and an increasing client churn rate. The company's stock value dipped. The murmurs turned into outright questions in board meetings. His charming excuses no longer held water. The visionary project he'd stolen remained a phantom, a symbol of promises unfulfilled. I didn't actively seek out news about Nexus or David, but it was impossible to ignore. Industry publications, once singing praises of Nexus's upcoming innovation, started running articles questioning their sudden stagnation. Competitors thrived, and Meridian Tech, powered by my revitalized team and the successful launch of my now fully credited project, quickly became a rising star. The irony wasn't lost on me. The project David had tried to steal was now Nexus's biggest failure, while it was Meridian's greatest triumph. A few years later, I saw David at a small, regional industry event. He looked defeated. His distinguished beard seemed less groomed, his eyes lacked their former sparkle, and his expensive suit seemed to hang a little loosely on him. He was no longer the confident, booming presence. He was just another attendee, trying to network, his charm strained and ineffective. He met my gaze for a fleeting second, and in his eyes, I saw not anger, but a raw, hollow emptiness. He quickly looked away, slinking into the crowd. I didn't approach him. There was no need for grand declarations or dramatic confrontations. My success spoke for itself. My new company was flourishing, my team was thriving, and the Nexus Core project, under its proper name and guided by its rightful creator, was impacting the industry just as I had always dreamed. What happened to David wasn't my doing directly. I didn't plot his downfall, I didn't actively seek to destroy him or Nexus. I simply chose to build my own path, to stand by my truth, and to reclaim what was mine. His suffering, Nexus's decline, these were direct consequences of his own choices, his own dishonesty, and his own inability to genuinely innovate without relying on others. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about the fundamental truth that you cannot silence or dismiss someone simply because you perceive them as weak or less powerful. You cannot stomp on their dreams, steal their work, and then expect them to quietly disappear. People who suffer injustice are still people. They have feelings, they have dignity, and sometimes, they have the strength to rise from the ashes of betrayal and build a monument to their own worth. And when they do, the architects of their pain are often left to crumble in the shadow of their own misdeeds.